All right, welcome back, and thank you so much for keeping it NBS Television and for keeping it right here with us. It's time for our breakfast meeting, and a very important topic for discussion this morning is going to be on access to justice. You know, it's always said, justice delayed is justice denied. We're all under lockdown, and remember when the president did address the nation and dealt with decongesting some densely populated areas like schools, churches and all others. Prisons were not part of that, particularly. They weren't. And even after more and more guidelines were given, especially after the ban on public transport, a number of essential services were stated, and the judiciary was not a part of the essential services. But remember, we have people who are still in prisons, people who yearn to access justice over there. And unfortunately, for this period of time, they cannot. And because the president kept saying many other areas had to come up with standard operating procedures that had to be developed just to curb the spread of COVID-19, for the prison service, they came up with the aspect of not having any visitors from outside, any private visitors, not even the lawyers are allowed to access their clients back in the prisons. What does this mean for access to justice? That is going to be our main center for discussion at this particular moment in time. And of course, I will be speaking to Susan Baluka, who is the legal officer, Human Rights and Awareness Promotion Forum, and just right on my immediate left. And I'll also be speaking to Sylvia Nambiru, who is the executive director, Legal Aid Service Providers, or LASPNet. You've definitely paid attention to the two organizations on social media. So good morning, ladies. It's an all-lady panel. Good, good morning, Susan.
Good morning, Mildred.
And good morning to you, Sylvia.
Good morning, Mildred.
It's a great one having both of you right here. You know, when the president talked about essential services and under this whole lockdown, personally, my first thought went to the prisons, because we are over 6,000. We are 3 times more than what the number should be in these prisons. First of all, that means there is a lot of congestion in the prisons. But with the ban on prison visits particularly, what does that mean? What is the implication of this on the prisoners themselves? If I'll start with you, Susan.
Well, for one, it does have negative implication on their right to liberty. I mean, yes, it will sound a bit ironic if you're talking about right to liberty for a prisoner. Well, as much as our constitution does provide for limiting the right to liberty in certain circumstances, such as COVID-19, but also such as where someone has been arrested on suspicion of having committed an offense, it does leave room for certain rights guarantees, even when that person is in detention. And one of those is, first and foremost, access to a lawyer. But also, more importantly, it does have an impact on their right to a fair hearing. Now, under Article 28 of our Constitution, it does stipulate that where a person is accused of a criminal offense, they shall be accorded adequate time and facilities in order to prepare for their defense. Now, one of the facilities that definitely should be considered for a person to prepare for their defense is a lawyer, because you need a lawyer to give you the requisite legal advice to prepare for your defense. You need a lawyer to assist you prepare the requisite court documents in order to prepare for your defense as well, for your trial, but also for instance, bail applications. And if prison services has, in fact, taken a step of prohibiting prison visits without exception, even to lawyers,
yes,
then that is a problem. But also, it's important to appreciate the fact that for lawyers, not being considered as essential service providers, that also means that they are not in position to get to their clients in a timely fashion, even in circumstances where your client is appearing before a judicial officer who is operating in the courts that have been stipulated to continue operating by a circular that was issued by the Chief Justice. I'll give a vivid example of the Legal Aid Clinic at Human Rights Awareness and Promotion Forum. Just days after the lockdown had been announced and instituted by the president, we had our clients getting arrested from a shelter that was being used as a home, since they were homeless youth and they were using that particular house as a shelter. They were arrested on account of the fact that they were flouting the presidential ban on gatherings of more than 10 people.
10 people, yes.
You see, and yet these are people who are in their home. But the presidential directive was with regard to public gatherings. Now, does that mean that for every household, you also have to consider the issue of social justice? Even as you're looking at criminal justice, you also need to look at the aspect of social justice. What do the different directives mean for different categories of people? Yeah. So our clients are arrested, and we are not in position
from the home.
Yes, from the home. They are remanded. Rather, they are presented in court, and we're not in position to get to court in time because of the ban on transportation and the restriction on movement. But as a lawyer, you've not been given the opportunity, or you've been considered among the essential service providers, so you can't actually get to your client in time in order to represent them. And for such a scenario, make an application for bail on their behalf so that they can, probably be released and go back home, and you don't have to be bundled up in the prison cell where they are going to be at a higher risk of contracting the coronavirus because, well, that is now a densely populated space in the prison. So I think for lawyers, it is something that needs to be the service that they offer is something that needs to be actually taken into account as essential, in addition to the judicial officers.
All right, maybe, Susan. The president the other day came up and said, well, people were complaining about the board at home. They were complaining about losing out money in terms of businesses. And he said, this is not about comfort. It is actually about saving lives. And in this case, isn't only the banning of visits by the prison service justified? Because look here, you are having rights on one side, but you are having preventing the spread of COVID-19 on the other hand. Isn't it justifiable? But if it is not, then what else could have the prison service done? Because they can't then release these people back into the community.
Yes, I think we need to understand, first of all, that the right to a fair hearing, which, as I've already mentioned earlier, does entail the right to access your lawyer for purposes of getting legal representation and the requisite legal advice, is in fact a non-derogable right. It's not a right that can be limited, if I'm to put it very simply, even in a state of emergency that threatens the life of a nation. That is provided for within our Constitution, and it is even provided for in the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. It's not a right that can be limited in any circumstance, even in a state of emergency, of which, as a country, we've not yet declared a state of emergency. But one would appreciate that the COVID-19 pandemic is a crisis in itself. But even then, according to our Constitution, it's not a right that can be limited. So the prison services limiting access to lawyers for the inmates is not in fact justifiable. But also we need to understand that there are quite a number of alternatives that they can adopt. For instance, the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights has issued guidance on this. She has pointed out the fact that, well, you can adopt alternative means of communication between inmates and their clients, inmates and their lawyers, I beg your pardon. You can, for instance, use telecommunication services. You will see in certain prisons where you have a protective glass screen with phones on either side that the lawyer and the inmate can actually use to communicate. You can still allow for physical prison visits while enforcing strict social distancing measures, just like now. We are practicing social distancing, and that is protective enough. So I really think that prison services banning access to lawyers for inmates is not in itself justifiable because of COVID-19, since first and foremost, that is in fact a violation of a very fundamental right that is non-derogable, such as the right to fair hearing, but also because there are quite a number of alternatives that they can put in place. In the COVID-19 response, and the different measures that are being taken, they can in fact use those alternative measures. If it's
but then that means that first we would have to recognize that the lawyers are part of the essential services, because even when you put all these when the lawyers can't be able to move, you don't have the stickers, then it becomes a little bit hard.
Exactly. So for lawyers and judicial officers, I think that is something that actually needs to be appreciated as a category of essential service providers, because when you're talking about putting measures that are essential to curbing the spread of COVID-19, those are a very essential category of persons, judicial officers and lawyers, for the purposes of curbing the spread, because their operation is very important to the decongestion of prisons.
Or maybe we should have lawyers sleeping at the courts. Well, that's a tongue-in-cheek. Sylvia, I want to come to you. Yes. The reality, looking at the demographics, is that many of these people in the prisons actually cannot even afford a lawyer, because the services of lawyers in Uganda have recently become, not recently, but to many seem to be extremely expensive. So would it be justifiable for us to be saying, well, we need the lawyers to be going, yet probably many of these people cannot even afford the lawyers, so probably they might stay in the prisons even longer?
Yes, Mildred. I forgot to wish our viewers a happy Labor Day.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. You raised a pertinent point. Yes, majority of the prisoners, 80%, cannot afford services of a lawyer. But then again, you realize that the majority that have been incarcerated before and during this time are the poor and vulnerable. The youth that cannot engage a private practitioner.
Sure.
So we have services for these people that are available. And as human rights lawyers or legal aid service providers, we have many lawyers that are willing and available to give these services. And you realize that majority of the lawyers now that are rescuing people, even high-profile cases, those are the human rights lawyers. Those are not the practicing lawyers. In the Legal Aid Service Providers Network, we have, for example, the Legal Rapid Response. And we have lawyers from the Legal Aid Service Providers that we have put aside that would be available in this time to rescue as many as possible. We have Human Rights and Awareness Promotion Forum. They have lawyers ready to be there. We have federal lawyers that would be helping, especially those that are involved in issues of domestic violence and plus. So when you look at the 2,000 that has been incarcerated or arrested in the period of COVID, and then you add on the 823 that have been released, majority of them are poor, and they would have evenly been supported during this period and reduced on the risk of them going again and getting in touch with already the decongested places. The right to legal counsel, we've been talking about it, and it is anchored in the Constitution. True. I want to emphasize that.
Yeah.
And that has been the thing we've been talking about right from the beginning, that lawyers are essential. We even petitioned the Commission of Prisons with Advocates and Frontiers, Chapter 4 Uganda, and us. And we petitioned immediately, and we alerted government of Uganda, the Justice and Order sector, and we told them, look here, there is a problem there if you don't deal with it. Okay. Can we have as many prisoners pardoned? And can we have as many prisoners access lawyers where possible? And we are happy to say that they responded, but it's not enough.
822.
It's not enough. It's just a small fraction of about 23,000 something prisoners across the prisons in Uganda, which is beyond the capacity, which is around 313%. So it's beyond the capacity. Would like to the executive that is now making guidelines and directives to recognize the presumption of innocence is very key, and the supremacy of the Constitution. And that's why we are saying legal services are essential.
Yeah.
Article 2 of the Constitution makes it the supreme law, that all these others are subordinate and they have to be in conformity with the Constitution. Now you go into Article 23, which Susan has been alluding to. The presumption of innocence is the cornerstone of the criminal justice. That everyone who is arrested, until the courts have already pronounced them that they are guilty, you cannot subject and limit their liberty. The entitlement to bail is still anchored in Article 23. The legal representation is still anchored in Article 23. Then you go into Article 28 of the Constitution, now which speaks to the right to fair hearing. You cannot speak about the right to fair hearing when the lawyers
don't have
are
a
not
lawyer.
available.
Yeah.
So should these people who are poor, just because they cannot afford a private practitioner, not be given at least an opportunity to these lawyers who are available to give free services? And would have been available even much more than before. Because right now, would be focusing, there are no meetings, there are nothing. So would be focusing to going to decongest the prison to ensure that we minimize on the risk of those that are coming in and those that are already there.
But well, the prison service is stating that the people who are coming in are actually not going directly. They have been able to disperse them to different holding centers. I don't know whether you're privy to such information, that they're not mixing those who are being remanded with those who already existed. And is that genuine enough for them to do?
Mildred, which better place would be more better to keep a suspect than their homes? If you've been to prisons, they are doing their best. Actually, they are the best institution in the justice and order sector that tries their best to observe human rights, but still the numbers are too many. I've been to Maxon Falls, and you can see the numbers.
Maxon Bay?
Maxon Bay.
Okay.
And you can even wonder when they talk about social distancing. Go to Upper, you wonder. Kiria is a new prison, we don't know, but you can wonder the social distancing. So I have already told you the presumption of innocence. Imagine, Mildred, you have been like a pregnant, let me give you this example, live example. A gentleman coming from hospital, going home to take a pregnant mother who has just delivered.
Yes.
And because they have arrived from hospital, around 7 p.m., there's no food. The gentleman runs to go and buy food so that he can come back and cooks for the mother. And they are arrested because there is a curfew. And they are taken away from this mother who needs care. And they are taken away, however good it is, however distancing it is. Imagine the trauma, the pain of not being near your wife was just delivered,
sure.
and the scenario under which you have arrested. And that is the meaning of presumption, that however much you keep me away, can we allow to exercise more measures than incarceration? Can we exercise the discretion of the police, the OCs, to release on bond? People are more safe in their homesteads than the prisons. And they will come and answer when the lockdown ends. Because 1 month to say you are granted bond, and make sure that on the 5th you return here to answer your charges.
All right,
we save so much.
Sylvia, we've had over time a specific word that has come up in the judicial system: case backlog, case backlog. We continue, because currently the prison service did say they have remanded close to 2,000 people,
Exactly.
and about 271 have so far have been convicted over, defying the presidential directives.
Yes.
But we've also seen that there's been some online court system that has happened on some occasions. Is that adequate enough?
It's a welcome measure. We can't really say, when you say something small, one meat which is smaller is better than nothing. It is a good measure. And two, where we are going, especially to reduce on case backlog and delays, we are going to use ICT where we are going. But it is something that is not introduced haphazardly and in a rush. It is a systematic way of doing things, but now it came in a rush. In the majority of Ugandans, wherever they are, they have no access to internet. Even those who have access to internet. MBs, do you know the cost? I've been working at home and I'm using internet. You don't know, almost on a daily basis, I'm reinforcing. I'm putting on 20,000 after 3 days, like that. And even when I'm communicating, say by Zoom, and I'm attending to a meeting, in the process, I get off. I'm the chair, I get off. So that is the scenario. Judicial officer is receiving a suspect that has been aligned and is reading charges to this person. In the process, the lawyer is online, power goes off. If not power, internet goes off. What happens in terms of the proceedings? So we still have a challenge of technicalities in as far as ICT is concerned. We also have a challenge in the spread and usage of ICT and use of internet. So it's not adequate enough. Indeed, it's going to add on the case backlog that the judiciary has been grappling with. We are going to see a judiciary that is going to be swamped and overwhelmed. Maybe they will work after COVID-19. They're going to work even beyond 10 to be able to manage the kind of.
But they're humans, of course. We're not very sure that.
So we are seeing more abuses after delayed trials. And justice delayed is justice denied. Delayed trials, delayed decision making, and many people continuing and suffering the consequences of overstay in detention.
All right. Susan, coming back to you, we've anxiously been paying attention to the president's speeches. And in the first place, when he was outlining the essential stuff, essential services, we all listened. In the first place, media wasn't also part of that. And there was a lot of advocating, and then in the second address, we had the media. But we've consistently not had judicial officers that much and lawyers. What is the implication of not having this category of people under the list of essential workers in such a time?
Well, thank you, Mildred. As I've pointed out earlier, well, first and foremost, that's going to mean a lot of human rights violations for people who are arrested and detained. When the police spokesperson was talking about people that have been arrested and detained, he didn't clearly indicate how many have actually been remanded in prison, because for one to be remanded, they must actually be presented before a judicial officer and they take plea before they can be remanded to prison. Now, with the fact that the judiciary is operating with skeleton staff, courts are not operating at full capacity. It begs the question, which actually should be investigated further by the media, as the fourth estate, among other actors, of course, as to how many people are actually being detained in police cells in contravention of the constitutionally guaranteed or mandated 48 hours within which a person should be kept in police cells before they are either presented before a judicial officer or released, either on bond or unconditionally. So that also raises the question. But also, in detaining different categories of people, like I mentioned earlier, it does raise certain issues of social justice. If various people are being arrested for especially flouting the presidential directives, what categories of people are those? Let us look at, for instance, women who depend on sex trade for survival, and the president did actually hit on them in the previous address that he gave earlier this week. The ones that actually do rely on truck drivers to be able to get various means of survival. The sex workers, he did actually hint on it.
Interesting that you're giving a category of people who are not they're not identified in the Constitution as really. That's again in the law. They are.
Thank you very much. Now, you see, the Constitution recognizes human rights for everyone, regardless of if you're a criminal, and I'm glad that we actually hinted on that in the beginning.
Exactly.
Regardless of whether you're branded a criminal, regardless of whether you are unpopular in society. And in the fight against COVID-19...
the law is against your act.
Exactly. And in the fight against COVID-19, the one thing that we must appreciate and which we ought to have learned from the fight against pandemics like HIV and AIDS is the issue of equality and respect for everyone. We are, if anything, COVID-19 has shown us that we are all equal in dignity and rights. Because if we choose to leave a certain category of persons behind, then at the end of the day, it's going to affect us, it's going to come back and bite us, and we won't see it coming. So if COVID-19 has showed us anything, that we are all equal in dignity and rights. And of course, as a society, we do have the issue of social prejudice. It's a vice within the Ugandan society, for sure.
Of public opinion, something like that?
Yes. And it is something that we should really fight against. It's not going to be a shield. I know some may think that it's going to be a shield in this fight, but it's not. If anything, it's our Achilles heel, it's our weakness in the fight against COVID-19. So if such vulnerable communities are actually being subjected to arrests because of flouting presidential directives, for instance, some of them will be the ones who will be stuck in the lodges, because at the time when the president directed that all those facilities should be locked and also public transportation should stop, where do you expect them to actually go in such a time? So it becomes difficult. So it also raises issues of social justice. But also, again, there is another side to that coin, or another category of people. People who are suffering from domestic violence in their homes. You see, the police last time was saying that in just 1 month, they have recorded 3,000 cases of domestic violence.
So you don't beat me up at 8 and you expect me to stay indoors. I'll definitely move out.
Exactly.
Yes.
So, and also if judicial officers and lawyers are not in position to actually continue with their operations, then that means that such cases are going to remain as cases that have been reported at the police without actually going ahead to be educated upon, and that leaves the victims of domestic violence or the survivors of domestic violence and gender-based violence without remedies and at the mercy of their abusers. So it does have really far-reaching implications on human rights and justice in every sense of the word, be it criminal justice, be it social justice. It does have quite a number of negative implications for the vulnerable. This pandemic has only made different inequalities more pronounced.
Oh, sure.
So the people who are already marginalized are being pushed further into the margins of society because of this pandemic. You see. So I think that in order to curb the negative implications of the COVID-19 pandemic, not only the direct implications, but also the indirect implications, we need to have a comprehensive response to dealing with it. Yes, social distancing is important, restricting movement is important, but you need to look into who can I allow to move? And if I allow them to move, what are the measures that I can put in place? Yeah. So I don't think that we should have a very tunnel vision when dealing with this pandemic. We should have a very comprehensive approach and a broader vision to dealing with this pandemic. I'll just give you a very good example. As a country, we have not registered any death that is directly because of COVID-19, and everyone is taking comfort in that. They're seeing us that they're hanging on to that for hope that things are going to be better. But we have in fact registered quite a number of deaths because of COVID-19
and the way issues have been handled.
So, and I actually think the media, your role as the fourth estate has never been so important as it is right now. And it is very good when you do report those stories, because that also actually informs the president as the head of the executive on what direction he can now take on different issues. You could see the measures that he took on pregnant women, going after seeing various reports about women who died.
And now, unfortunately, people are using pregnant women as stickers. Saying
that is another.
That is another.
Well, there is that, but at the end of the day, it all trickles down to the issue of how do you enforce enforcement of the measures that are in place. Okay. So I think it's really important to have a very, very comprehensive,
broader perspective
approach to this pandemic, because we might have to learn new ways of living. We don't know how long this pandemic is going to go.
I totally agree with you.
It's a replica. It's very similar to the Spanish flu of 1918, and from the information that I got after reading up on it, is that it lasted 2 years.
Wow.
So
yeah, we don't know how long this will be taking. That's why, Sylvia, in this case, I want to come back. It's a few days to the end of the lockdown, but everyone is asking, do we have an extension? Are we not going to have an extension? If we don't, there is going to be a new way of living. And access, two things that I'm picking from this conversation: that human rights is definitely going to remain paramount, and we have to ensure that that happens.
Already seen it is paramount.
Exactly. And then the access to justice. What more can the judiciary think out to ensure that these two are upheld?
Okay. I don't want only to say the judiciary, because the judiciary is not working alone. What more can the executive, that is setting policies, together with the judiciary, can think through? Yes. First of all, as she has said, we need to be comprehensive. By now we have learned lessons of what did we not do right and what we should be, what did we leave out. When you say that you are implementing directives and measures to protect lives, then it's very important that all the actors that are supposed to be within these measures are put into consideration. So looking at the fact that the law enforcement agents are there, out there in the community, and they are enforcing law, who then says that lawyers are out of the equation? You cannot enforce a law without a watchdog. The lawyers are the primary watchdogs when it comes to enforcement of the law. So it is very important that the judiciary joins voices with the lawyers and be able to engage the executive to ensure that this time around, even if we are extending, if there is a partial lockdown, there are certain essentials that are not left out, because they speak a lot to the promotion and protection of human rights. We should be able to consider what has happened in the society, the domestic violences that are increasing. What is the best way? Do we want to come out of this lockdown when people are maimed?
Of course
When
not.
people have lost their mothers? When people have lost their fathers? Where is the probation function in this equation? Where is the Child and Family Protection Police in this equation? Where are the paralegals in this equation? So, and should we only continue with a thin judicial officers on duty?
Not adequate, of course.
They are not adequate enough. First of all, they're also human. The right to bail, they will just say, father remanded. Your father remanded because one lady who has sat from morning to evening is already tired to attend to 100 people that have been rounded up and brought before them. So we would like the judiciary to expand and discuss and ensure that as we are going, whether we are in continued total lockdown, whether we are in partial lockdown, the human resource or the judicial officers and those that support them, the clerks, are increased a bit, especially for critical emergency consideration. Then we'd like to see the police and the DPP, that the police prosecutes and the DPP. We'd like to see decision-making at the level of the sanctioning. What cases need to be sanctioned to go into the system? What cases can be allowed for people to be given bail? What is the discretionary powers of the investigating officers, the OCs, in terms of saying, I think these particular cases, people can be released, we have registered, they have produced sureties, or even if they have not, a person can be a surety on their own right, for as long as they have a fixed place overboard. Look at these other cases of high profile. Why would a person go to the extent of being assaulted to the extent of losing conscience? The judiciary should not allow that because we have left that in equation. They should not receive suspects that are in dire need of health care and even attempt to enter them into their compound. They should be given medical treatment. We should emphasize the constitutional rights. Access to next of kin when someone is arrested. Access to a health doctor, their doctor. Access to their lawyers, those that can. Those who cannot, the available legal aid service providers and human rights lawyers are available. They should be given opportunity to say, can I be helped by a lawyer? Such that the decision-making does not jeopardize, does not affect the dignity, the human dignity in the process. So that we end up comprehensively protecting lives and ensure that every actor that matters, the support that is required is given to every individual. We come out better in this COVID-19.
Well, time is first spent, but this is a conversation I would like to go on and on with for the entire day. But Susan, I want to get your final remarks. And given the fact that we are in a season that we do not know how long it will be taking, how best can we work and act ensuring that we respect each other's rights, because it's not only for the judicial officers or the Uganda Prison Service, respect each other's rights, but also ensure that access to justice is paramount, because like it said, justice delayed is justice denied.
Thank you, Mildred. Well, for one, I think the judiciary or the Chief Justice as the head of the judiciary, which is in itself is an independent organ of government, needs to take center stage on this. Work hand in hand with the president as the head of the executive to actually clearly and categorically state judicial officers and lawyers as essential workers, because that's the only way that the police officers, as the members of the executive who implement orders from the executive, will be able to respect that, so that the various persons who are actually in need of free legal, especially those who need free legal aid services from various legal aid service providers, can be given a chance to access justice, but also to actually help with the decongestion of prisons, because if even just one case is reported in a prison facility, it would really be disaster. So I think we really need to work towards putting in place infrastructure that will help with ensuring criminal justice for people who end up getting detained, but also which in itself helps with decongestion of prisons, especially since 50% of the prison population are people on remand. Haven't yet been convicted. So they should be given a chance to stay home and self-isolate from home.
And stay safe after all.
Yes, and stay safe.
Sylvia, our time is totally spent out, but I'll give you 1 minute.
Yes.
You've continuously talked about those who cannot even be able to access a lawyer or pay for a lawyer. There's so many service providers available for them, for pro bono services. How can one, because probably there are people out there who have their own arrested, but they don't know. They don't have the money for a private lawyer, but they didn't even know that they can't be able to access free legal aid services. If you could just let us know how to access those and we get out.
Okay. Unfortunately, I'm trying to see the toll-free line. It's in my line, and I can't give it. It's not off head.
Okay.
But they can contact us at the Legal Aid Service Providers Network. We shall leave you the number, and you can be able to share it, so that they can be able to be helped. We shall be able to get rapid response lawyers. But the challenge remains until we are lifted, until we are given opportunity to move, until we are given stickers. But through our toll-free line, we are able to provide the services.
Okay. And of course, we'll definitely be able to get you that very toll-free line, and we will share it with you either on our social media pages, but also right here on NBS television. Well, that's all we had time for, but we will continue with this discussion at a later stage. I've had Sylvia Nambiru, who is the Executive Director of Legal Aid Service Providers Network, or LASPNet, and Susan Baluka, who is the Legal Officer at Human Rights Awareness and Promotion Forum. Thank you for being a wonderful audience as well. Let's continue with this discussion on social media at NBS TV, on Twitter, NBS Television, on Facebook, and you can get us on social media at Next Media Services. Thank you for keeping it right here. Good morning and God bless you.